My fellow citizens, today does not bring only the cold of a new day. It brings a shadow that threatens to darken the very foundation of our national stability. I address you with the gravity of someone who understands that history is not made only of great battles, but of the deafening silence that precedes the fall of institutions. What is at stake at this moment is not a simple partisan dispute or a fleeting fluctuation in the stock market. What we are witnessing is the deliberate demolition of the sacred wall that separates partisan politics from your sweat, your savings, and the future of your children. For more than a century, the United States has maintained a vital line of defense, the independence of the Federal Reserve. That wall was built to ensure that the value of the dollar in your pocket would not be decided by the whim or electoral desperation of whoever happened to be occupying the Oval Office. Today, that wall has suffered a blow that may be fatal. Look at the gravity of this news that has just shaken the foundations of Washington and echoed through the financial capitals of the world. The Department of Justice has issued a criminal subpoena against the Fed chair, Jerome Powell. The official justification, presented with a cynicism that should offend the intelligence of every American, speaks of investigations into alleged contractual irregularities in renovations of central bank buildings. But let us be honest, because truth is the only shield we have left. This is not about architecture or maintenance contracts. This is pure and brutal retaliation. It is the use of the armed arm of the state to punish and bend a man who refused to be a political puppet. Powell committed the crime of prioritizing long-term economic health instead of cutting interest rates at the speed demanded to artificially inflate the economy before the next electoral cycle. For everyone to understand the magnitude of the danger, we need to talk about what central bank independence really means. It is not a distant academic concept. It is the wall that prevents politicians from destroying your purchasing power to win votes. When the Fed is independent, it makes decisions based on technical data and inflationary reality. If that wall falls, the dollar ceases to be the most reliable reserve currency on the planet and becomes a casino chip in the hands of the government. What is happening now is a clear attempt to turn the Federal Reserve into an administrative annex of the White House. If politics begins to dictate the price of money, inflation will cease to be a technical error and become a deliberate political choice used to melt away government debt at the expense of your retirement and your purchasing power at the grocery store. Think about the legacy we will leave if we allow this maneuver to be normalized. As we speak, global markets are in a state of profound shock. The dollar, once the unquestioned symbol of American strength, is trembling. Investors around the world are looking at Washington and seeing, for the first time in our modern history, the clear signs of an instability typical of authoritarian regimes. Gold is surging to record levels, and this rise is not a cause for celebration. It is an index of fear. It is capital fleeing uncertainty and seeking refuge, while the ordinary citizen who depends on a salary paid in dollars is left behind to foot the bill. The villain of this story is not a single individual, but the perverse temptation to centralize absolute power and remove the checks and balances that prevent our scoot. Historical records show that control of the Treasury is always the first step in the authoritarian playbook. If the government can legally intimidate those who safeguard our currency, then no bank account, no contract, and no pension fund is truly safe. This maneuver by the Department of Justice is not about administrative transparency, it is about raw power. They want the keys to the vault to finance promises the country cannot sustain, and the price of that bill will be charged to your 401k, the savings you have set aside for decades, and the stability that allowed the American middle class to prosper. We are facing a direct attack on the heart of the American way of life, an erosion of the basic trust that sustains our society. The impact of this on everyday life will be felt in every mortgage, every student loan, and the price of every imported product. When politics invades the central bank, trust dies. And when trust dies, the system collapses. The dollar has value not because the government says it does. It has value because the world trusts that our system is based on stable rules and not political vendettas. By attacking Powell, the government is attacking the very credibility of the signature of the United States of America. It is a one-way path to the devaluation not only of the currency, but of our own dignity as a nation that claims to be governed by laws. Unfortunately, my fellow citizens, this financial chaos that is beginning to unfold in Washington is only half of a much darker story. While they attack our money in the marble corridors of the Capitol, blood has already begun to flow in the streets of Minneapolis. The same heavy hand that now tries to crush financial autonomy is the hand that is knocking on the doors of ordinary Americans, ignoring fundamental civil rights in the name of a supposed higher order. The dismantling of the economy is the prelude to the dismantling of individual freedom. But don't go anywhere, because in the second part of this analysis, I will show you how the new security policy is knocking on the doors of American citizens and what this means for the future of our freedom and our personal security. Continuing our analysis, we need to face the brutal and direct connection between what happens in the offices of Washington and what happens on the asphalt of Minneapolis. There is a perverse logic in the erosion of institutions. If the government does not respect the independence of an institution as powerful as the Federal Reserve, why do you believe it would respect the life, privacy, or security of an ordinary citizen on the streets? Authoritarianism knows no geographic or institutional limits. It is an organism that, once unleashed, consumes everything in its path. The attack on our financial system was merely the green light for the attack on our fundamental rights. My fellow citizens, observe closely the name Renee Good. She was not a political figure, not a high-ranking bureaucrat, nor a radical activist. Renee was an American mother, a neighbor, a citizen who lived her life within the law. And yet she was killed by federal ICE agents in Minneapolis under circumstances that defy any notion of human decency and due process of law. The government rushed to issue cold statements claiming that she represented a threat, but local reports and evidence emerging from communities show a far more frightening reality: the use of disproportionate lethal force and the suspension of basic guarantees in the name of a centralized federal directive. If the state can label a mother in her vehicle as a legitimate target without court scrutiny, then our Constitution has ceased to be a shield and has become merely a paper memory. The case of Renee Good is the tragic symbol of what happens when federal force is unleashed without the brakes of the separation of powers. It is the human and bloody reflection of the fall of the dollar we discussed earlier. Both, the currency and the life of the citizen, are victims of a state that has decided it is above the law and owes explanations to no one. When central power feels threatened or greedy, it attacks on two fronts. It confiscates your wealth through economic instability and confiscates your freedom through physical intimidation. It is a cycle we have seen in other parts of the world, but that many believed could never happen here, on American soil. Look at the gravity of the official reaction to this tragedy. Mayor Jacob Frey and local leaders in Minneapolis raised their voices in protest against this violent federal incursion, but Washington's response was even more alarming. Instead of transparency, instead of an independent investigation, the central government began labeling ordinary citizens who exercised their constitutional right to protest as domestic terrorists. Think about the weight of those words. This is the final step in the destruction of freedom of expression and the right of assembly. If questioning the death of a neighbor at the hands of federal agents instantly turns you into an enemy of the state in the eyes of the Department of Justice, then democracy has already been replaced by a de facto autocracy. They use these technical and frightening terms to dehumanize dissent and justify mass surveillance over any American who dares to demand justice. What is at stake here is our common decency and the legacy we will leave to future generations. The United States was not founded to be a place where citizens fear the sound of federal boots on their sidewalk. We were founded on the idea that government exists exclusively to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When they turn our cities into zones of occupation and Washington into a center of persecution against guardians of the economy, the social contract that binds us is being torn apart before our eyes. Decency demands that we not remain silent while our neighbors are labeled and our freedoms are pruned by bureaucrats who have never felt the weight of an honest day's work. In the face of this scenario of planned chaos, my advice to you is absolute vigilance and institutional resistance. Do not accept the normalization of these abuses. The health of our republic now depends, more than ever, on supporting local institutions that still resist the centralization of power. Support your sheriffs who honor their oath to the Constitution. Support your community leaders who do not bow to illegal directives. And above all, stay informed outside the bubbles of official propaganda. The protection of our families against federal abuses begins with our individual courage to say that the government is not our master, but our servant. If we allow fear to dictate our actions, authoritarianism will already have won. We are at a historic crossroads that will define the 21st century. The attack on our money through the intimidation of the Fed and the attack on our lives through state violence are two sides of the same oppressive coin. There is no real economic stability without sacred respect for civil rights, and there is no true freedom without a currency that the government cannot manipulate for its own benefit. If we allow this dark day to pass without a firm response from the American conscience, we will be handing over the country we love to those who seek nothing but total control. But there is still hope if we act with clarity and unity. Truth is a powerful solvent that corrodes the lies of tyranny, no matter how high the walls they build. If you believe from the depths of your heart that no one, absolutely no one, whether the occupant of the Oval Office or an armed federal agent is above the law, then you have a duty to join us in this resistance for truth. This channel and this voice exist to be the beacon that the mainstream media tries to extinguish. Do not let silence be your consent. If you defend the separation of powers and the rule of law, like this video so it breaks through algorithmic barriers and reaches more patriots. Share this message with all those who still believe in the original American dream before it is transformed into a bureaucratic nightmare. And subscribe now to continue receiving the analyses you will not find anywhere else. Our resistance begins with information. May reason prevail, and may God protect the United States of America in this hour of trial.